Hello, I am Steve Cully, the best podcast host in the universe. This is called Bloodlines and Betrayal. It's a brand new podcast. We are doing it to replace Husky Hoops at the time, and we are going to talk about some true crime cases that are interesting, mysterious, scary, and we don't know where they're going. And with me, as always, my co-host, Dave Schumann. I'm not doing the ASMR, Dave. I know that's what you're trying to get me to do.
The ASMR voice still might work well here for
yeah.
It's scarier, right?
Yeah. So we're venturing into the true crime world to show we are the best podcast in the universe. Everyone should watch us. We're the most entertaining, and we can do anything. We can talk about anything and make it entertaining and informative and give you insight and analysis. That's why we're the best. And that's why I said lock down my balls. So today we are going to talk about the Menendez brothers and their case and their possible resentencing, which could get them released. Now, Dave and I both had differing opinions on the subject, but it's a very, very good case. And I followed it. I watched all the specials. I watched all the documentaries. And I think that they had a mistrial. I think they should have, the second trial, the judge was unfair to them and didn't let them use certain things. So they ended up being convicted.
Namely the abuse from when they were younger, right? As being admissible in
Well, the whole thing started with there was abuse by Jose Menendez, the father, okay?
Alleged.
Alleged. And it started with the older brother, who I believe is Lyle. It started with Lyle. And it happened for years when he was like 7, okay? And, Jose would take him and he would work him out, play tennis, and then after he would stretch him. But after during the stretching, there would be a little fondling and touching that went on for years. And it really scarred Lyle. So then, unfortunately, it happened to Eric as well. Eric got touched.
And the younger one was the better tennis player, correct? The younger one.
The one of I think it was Lyle that went to Princeton. I'll double check on that.
And this is alleged. This is not at all.
It is not all alleged.
Okay.
Their cousins testified during the trial that Lyle had told them about the abuse.
Right. So Lyle is telling them, and Eric's telling them. So
it was secondhand. Yes, but it was.
Can I read the background of the case just to give people a little? So on August 20, 1989, Lyle and Eric Menendez shot their parents multiple times with shotguns, later attempting to fabricate an alibi by attending Batman.
Yep.
Right, attending a movie and disposing of the weapons. That's the first thing that, premeditated.
Well, it was premeditated, 100%. 100%. They were trying to claim self-defense, which was wrong.
They claimed the murders were a response to years of sexual and emotional abuse by their father, Jose Menendez, a former RCA Records executive. Prosecutors argued the motive was a financial gain, noting the brothers' lavish spending following the killings.
That was the
first sign. Their first trials in 1993 ended in hung juries, but a
Yes.
1995 retrial led to the convictions and life sentences without parole in 1996. If you want, I'll read to you the reasons for potential parole as from different resources. Okay, so
Well, I just wanted to say the second trial, okay,
Yep.
the judge limited the defense.
Okay.
Limited the defense to 64 witnesses, which they had more. And they also the judge limited the testimony of the allegations of the abuse. Like Eric alleged that Jose told him he was written out of the will. So the judge really cut the defense down. So that made a huge difference. And also, there were no cameras allowed in the killing. And, Lyle, during the trial, yes. Okay. And they also were allowed to say, they called Lyle's former fiance, which she was not allowed to testify in the first trial, that Lyle tried to bribe her to falsely testify that the mob killed the parents, which she originally believed. And she testified that she regularly visited Lyle in prison, and he offered her a bribe, money, to claim that Jose Menendez made sexual advances toward her. So that testimony was paramount to the conviction. You can go ahead.
Yeah. So there are some things that are first of all, I don't believe a thing that comes out of their mouth. So
it's just because they're wealthy. You don't believe
rich kids who didn't get their way and didn't like that. Now, listen, I don't know if there were some shenanigans that went on, but they didn't get their way. They didn't like it as they were adults at this point.
They were, and they got everything handed to them.
Who could make decisions? Who were graduated from Ivy League schools? I think.
Well, they didn't graduate
or whatever.
Lyle, that was part of the issue. Lyle actually flunked out of Princeton.
Okay, so he didn't like to work hard. He didn't want to. So there's a lot of things there. And he got into Princeton.
They lived in Princeton. They lived there, and Jose was a legend because he created Menudo. That's where they got their money from.
All right. So let's read this. So several factors have contributed to the possibility of parole for Menendez brothers. New evidence: a 1988 letter from Eric to a cousin, that's what you're talking about, detailing ongoing abuse, and testimonial from Roy Rosello, a former member of the boy band Menudo, alleging sexual abuse by Jose Menendez, have emerged.
Correct.
These pieces of evidence were not presented during the ongoing trial. So
they weren't allowed. Yes.
That's to your point.
Definitely.
Yes. Rehabilitation effort. First of all, the music industry as a whole is as we're seeing with whether
it's awful.
It's awful. I mean, they groom these young people, so
they totally take advantage of them.
Yeah, none of this stuff surprised me. Rehabilitation efforts. During the 35 years in prison, both brothers have engaged in significant rehabilitation activities. Lyle has maintained a spotless disciplinary record, initiated programs like the Green Space Project to improve inmate well-being. Eric has launched educational support programs for elderly and disabled inmates. Both have earned sociology.
They're both married too.
Well, I'm sure because they're celebrities. I'm sure women are crazy. So UC Irvine with Lyle pursuing a master's degree. So those to me now, as far as getting out for parole, the rehabilitation efforts to me after 35 years are strong evidence that they should be able to get out. Okay.
Well, yes, but the deal is they would need to be resentenced, and the judge,
I can read it.
He's in their favor. He worked. Yes, he picked their favor.
Okay, so in 2018, California enacted a law allowing individuals convicted as youths under 26 to be eligible for parole after 25 years. Given that Lyle and Eric were 21 and 18 at the time of their crime, they qualify under the statute. Former Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon, that must be who you're talking about, recommended resentencing them to 50 years to life, making them
he wanted to keep them in.
Right, making them immediately eligible for parole. Current status: the Los Angeles judge allowed resentencing hearings to proceed. Obviously, scheduled for tomorrow and Friday.
It's a big deal.
Current District Attorney Nathan Hochman opposes the resentencing, arguing that the brothers have not fully acknowledged their responsibility. Interesting. If the judge approves the resentencing, the case will move to California Parole Board and potentially to get Governor Gavin Newsom for final review, who 100% is going to approve it because he's a left-wing nut. So, even though they were probably right-wing.
But you have to understand too, the delay of the first trial was because of the psychiatrist. Lyle was seeing a psychiatrist.
Right, so I remember that from the documentary movie.
Yes, yep. And after the murder, Lyle and Eric told the psychiatrist what they had done.
Right,
and the psychiatrist secretly recorded it, and his girlfriend also knew about it. So the delay in the trial was, can the psychiatrist testify? Because there's supposed to be privilege between, doctor-patient. So eventually, the judge did allow the judge did allow the psychiatrist to testify, and that was a big blow to what they did. But they have not taken full responsibility because they still claim everything is about the abuse. The abuse is why everything happened. But unfortunately, after the murder, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. They invested in businesses. They traveled. Lyle bought a buffalo wing restaurant in Princeton. They got Rolex watches. They got Porsche Camaro sports cars. Eric, who is the better tennis player, got a full-time tennis coach and competed in a series of tournaments overseas. They eventually left their Beverly Hills mansion unoccupied, choosing to live in condominiums in nearby Marina del Rey. They also ate at the best restaurants, took overseas trips to the Caribbean, to London. They went to New York Knicks games, Lakers games. They spent a fortune. So that caused the police to be very suspicious of what they did. And Eric allegedly told one of his friends that he did it. He killed his parents. And
obviously he did it.
And now this is the crazy part, okay? Eric also wrote a 66-page screenplay titled Friends, which depicted a son killing his wealthy parents for their inheritance in an attempt to get a confession. He did this before the murders. So the police arranged for Eric's friend to wear a wire during lunch, and Eric was smart enough to deny killing his parents when they asked about it. But he did write that screenplay about the murder before it even happened. So that was really part of the problem of why they were convicted. And Jerome Ozell, who was the psychiatrist, Eric confessed to him. And then Judy Ann Smith was the mistress of Dr. Odell. And she began recording his sessions with Lyle and Eric, because they continued to see Dr. Ozell because they were afraid that he could blow the whistle on them. And eventually that's exactly what happened. Dr. Ozell informed the police and they were arrested. So it's really a messy case. I do think, they wanted manslaughter. I agree with you, Dave. I don't think you could go with manslaughter because of
premeditated murder.
It was completely premeditated. They bought the guns. They went to the movie to have an alibi. They shot their parents, went to the movie, and it was absolutely ridiculous.
And every person that feels that they're abused in some capacity is allowed to just murder their family members.
No, they're not. They're not. They're not. I agree. I do think that they were abused. Lyle had said that he started being abused at the age of 6. But Eric was abused up until he was an adult. Shortly before the murders, this is what happened. Eric told Lyle that he was experiencing sexual abuse, which led to multiple confrontations with the family. And both kids were furious with the mother because the mother never protected them. The mother always stood up for Jose. So that was the problem. Kitty never believed them and wanted to stick it out with Jose because Jose was the meal ticket. Kitty couldn't do anything. If they got divorced, Kitty had nothing, no skill set or anything. And she didn't want that. So there was a time where Jose closed the door when he was abusing Eric, and Kitty watched it happen. And that was ridiculous. Like, she saw it and knew it was going to happen. So unfortunately, under California law, the brothers could only be acquitted for manslaughter if they could prove they were in imminent danger. And there was no evidence of that. And Leslie Abramson, the attorney, I thought she did a great job. I watched the first trial. She did an outstanding job, and she was very close to getting a not guilty verdict. The second trial was the one that was difficult because the judge really cut out all of their defense, and Leslie Abraham was limited with what she could do. Now, I 100% think, Dave, if you're in jail for 35 years, do you present a threat to anyone?
No, I would think not at this point. As long as they've been the one thing that disturbs me, the only thing that disturbs me is that they don't admit to the killings.
They admit to the killings, but they still say that it was self-defense. They don't take responsibility for it. They say, well, we were abused, so we had the right to protect ourselves. They said they were afraid that their father was going to kill them. That was their alleged defense of why it was self-defense. The father was going to kill him. He's like, oh, we were afraid Jose was going to go nuts and kill us, so we had to strike first. So the resentencing, they were trying to get a new trial, but it was pushed back to 2025, and now it is pushed back again until April. So we'll see what's going to happen. I think with the new DA, I think that they are going to get resentenced, and I think they are going to get out or at least paroled. They're not going to get, the conviction overturned or anything like that. But I think they are going to get out, and I think they deserve to. I think 35 years, Dave. Come on, 35 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, only if, the key thing is if this other evidence is a reality, then I would say that there's reason that after 35 years to parole them and give them a second opportunity.
Yeah.
I would not
Sure.
overturn a conviction.
Which won't happen.
Right. But parole, you could watch them. You could see if they are on the
Being
outside.
on parole is no picnic.
Right. That's what I'm saying. You could they got to go to a halfway house at first, and then you could monitor to see if they're behaving properly and if they violate any of the parole terms. And so I don't see a huge issue there.
Dave, my issue is like your tax money and our
is
tax money are paying for them in prison. You know, we pay for the prisoners.
well, the only thing is if they weren't such a high profile case, okay, the argument on the other side is what about other people who have committed those kind of murders that have a life sentence?
And are not getting the same.
They're not getting parole. They're not getting an opportunity. They don't have as much money as the Menendezes to be able to get.
Well, you have to understand, Dave, the family supports them.
Yes,
the family supports them.
So I read. So this came. Let me see. It says. What does it say here? It says over 20 of the Menendez families have publicly supported the brothers' bid for release, citing their remorse and rehabilitation efforts. Notably, their aunt Terry Baralt expressed their desire to be free and emphasized the emotional toll on the family. Despite growing support, Los Angeles District Attorney Nathan Hochman opposes resentencing, arguing that the brothers have not fully. We talked about that already,
right?
But
does it say in the article during this hearing their 85-year-old uncle passed out when he saw the murder pictures? They showed the pictures of the bodies of Jose and Kitty, and the 85-year-old uncle in court passed out and had to be taken to the hospital because it was so brutal.
That's the other part. Like they came, the brutality of the murder, and what
it's unbelievable
to their parents.
Was shocking, and
yeah. So there's no public record. There's no public record of them passing out during court. However, it's noteworthy that a juror in Lyle Menendez's trial suffered a heart attack during the penalty phase. Juror later stated,
that's what it was. It says the aunt. The Menendez brothers, the aunt was 85. She was unresponsive because of the pictures or whatever.
The juror later stated she would have voted for the death penalty, suggesting her replacement may have influenced the outcome. Additionally, the brothers' uncle, Milton Anderson, who was 91 years old at the time, opposed their release, passed away in 2025.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that. I did not know that. But the Menendez brothers showed up for their family showed up for the hearing, and they spoke out, and they said that the brothers should leave prison. They should be resentenced. And the only one was
so it is
the aunt wants them to leave because she said, I'm 85 years old. I have tried to go see them as much as I can, but it's hard because I live in New Jersey and I'm 85. I don't have much time. She wants them out. And I just think, man, you're not a threat after 35 years. You've been in there 35 years. Prison is supposed to rehabilitate you. And
I don't know if that's the case.
And I don't know. I think they've done the best that they could do for themselves.
Right.
And I think that they deserve a chance to live a normal life. Like, why keep them in prison for 50 years? Like, it doesn't do anyone any good, and we pay for it. The taxpayers fund it. Fund every day, fund their meals, fund their housing. Get them out. Get them out. That's my opinion.
It's interesting. This is interesting. Okay, I'm going to read this to you. Take it for what it's worth. Milton Anderson, the late uncle of Lyle and Eric Menendez, brother to their mother, Kitty Menendez, was a prominent family member who opposed their release from prison. He firmly believed that his nephews committed the murder out of greed, not due to alleged abuse. Motive of greed, Anderson asserted brothers killed their parents after learning they were to be removed from the will, motivated by the prospect of inheriting their parents' substantial estate. He dismissed the brothers' allegations of sexual abuse by their father, Jose Menendez, considering them fabrications intended to justify the murders. Anderson questioned their brother's rehabilitation, citing alleged violations of prison regulations,
which is true,
including unauthorized cell phone use and involvement in drug trafficking.
Wow, I didn't know that.
He expressed frustration over being excluded from discussions regarding brothers' potential resentencing, learning about the developments through media reports rather than official channels.
Wow.
He died obviously in March, so he no longer has a say. But
that's very interesting.
That's going to be brought up, and that's going to be brought up in the resentencing, definitely.
I think it's hearsay, though. You think they can? I wonder if they can bring it up.
I don't know if there. Well, there has to be evidence of them drug trafficking or authorized cell phone.
Oh yes, in prison, yes. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's.
What else do they do? Steal cigarettes? I mean,
but even so, Dave, 35 years. I mean,
sorry,
you don't think that's excessive? I mean, what they did was heinous and brutal, and the worst you could possibly do.
Well, the question is, what constitutes a life sentence? What kind of crime constitutes a life sentence? Let's not even talk about
the crime itself. Yes, the crime itself requires a life sentence, but the superseding factors, in my opinion, the abuse,
alleged superseding factors.
I don't know if it's alleged, though, because they told people beforehand that they were being abused. I mean, the cousin testified to that.
Were they letting this be known when they were teenagers? I mean, when were they?
Yeah, it was when Lyle was abused when he was young, when he was 6 to 8 years old, and then it stopped. Eric was abused from the time he was 6 until a teenager.
That's tough to prove. I'm not saying you can't have that stuff.
Yeah, the
one who was abused to was a teenager. That's a little bit easier.
Eric, that was Eric. Yes,
that's a little easier to prove.
Yes,
because he's actually much more cognitive.
If you watch his testimony, he cried. I mean, he couldn't get through his testimony at the first trial with Leslie Abraham. If you watch the first trial, when Eric testified, all he did was cry when talking about how he was touched by his father. And his testimony was limited in the second trial, which is why I think they were convicted. I do think the crime was heinous.
Is there a chance that their father was like, look, he was obviously a narcissist, the father.
Jose was, yes.
Yes. And so obviously there was probably some level of a minimum emotional level of abuse, right?
Very.
Right. Which is very damaging, obviously. Very, very damaging.
I think it's worse, the emotional abuse.
It might be, or at least equal, I guess. But which could be very damaging, often hard to quantify, very damaging.
Yeah.
And can make you do things that you probably would not normally have done. I would have been. I think they should get parole, but if all these things have been true, meaning they were model citizens in jail, if that actually was true. But as far as what they did, I don't think there's any justification.
You can't justify it. No, you can't.
I mean,
their argument for self-defense.
We've all been through this. You've been bullied. You've been in a fight because of it. Maybe you beat somebody up. You didn't murder them, right?
Exactly.
And so you could have chosen, if you were beating somebody up in a fight, to take it to that level, right?
Correct.
But you didn't. So you had control, right? And so that's the big question as far as for me, is this whole thing is like, where does self-control come into this, and where is the mind? Is the mind too far gone at a certain point of abuse where there is no that's what they're arguing. They're arguing that their minds are gone to so far.
Yeah, they snap. It was an out of body experience. Now the whole reason it happened was because Eric told Lyle, he's like, I'm still being abused by Dad. And Lyle went up to the father and said, if you ever touch Eric again, I'll fucking kill you.
Right.
And he touched him again. And then, well, that's what happened. So
that's what they say happened. That's what they say.
That's what they say happened. Yes. And I think the abuse is real. And I 100% think that they need to be resentenced and they should be.
It's hard to, all right. So let's go back to that time period. That's the 90s, right? I think I was in college during that time. They're probably around my age, maybe.
Yeah, they're in their late 50s. Yes.
Oh, they're older. All right, they're older. Okay, so so they're in their late 50s. No, that can't be.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Okay, so I thought it was 96 when they did the killing.
No, it was in 90.
90. Oh, 96 was okay.
The trial took a while because they appealed the psychiatrist testifying. That's what took so long for the trial.
So there's probably no doubt that a lot of parents were probably emotionally abusive during those days.
Of course,
yelling was often definitely a often utilized tool in a lot of instances. And I could tell you, the hardest thing about the whole thing is it seems like Jose Menendez definitely had a level of narcissism at minimum, right? And at maximum was some level of abusive. Okay.
Correct.
Could be wildly abusive, actually. We don't know. And then
for years.
What, like the Menudo thing, I think is an important thing because it's outside of.
It's another source.
It's another source, right, of where it was happening
to validate the abuse.
To validate it, right? Because my guess. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that would validate it.
The question is, does the abuse validate them murdering their parents? Does that give them cause to murder their parents? Now they say they were in fear for their lives, that the father was going to kill them. But I don't think it gave them cause for the murder. But they committed the crime, and it's been 35 years. I think it's time for them to be released. So we'll see what happens. It's Friday, I believe, right? The resentencing hearing. So we'll know.
Yeah, we'll know. Christy loves it.
What are you reading? Their comments? Oh, yeah. God, they're Bloodline. You guys host every time. Oh, Chris D, you're the man. I love you, Chris D. Jim Moore press conference going on. He just released on Store Central, going to listen now. Oh, Dave, Cole Welliver entered the transfer portal, by the way.
I'm not shocked. I would if I were him, to be honest.
All right.
I mean, if you were advising a 6'6", 225-pound quarterback who can't even sniff an opportunity for reps, would you advise him?
No.
Yeah. And I have no. By the way, we have no idea how good he actually is. So
no.
But anyway, sticking to Bloodlines, I think this is. I think your points are really valid.
Because my father's an attorney, so I know everything.
Yes, that's true, and I do think you have good insight from that standpoint, because he's probably defended people that have.
No, my father is not. He doesn't do. He does criminal, but he knows enough. I'm saying he probably knows enough from defending people. Yes.
Right, like where there's smoke and where there's fire, and but it's an interesting case. I do think after hearing all the stuff, there's enough to me. Is there reasonable doubt that they should get parole? In my guess, to Mitt, there is reasonable doubt enough that they should get parole. Not from the murders, not because they did murder, but reasonable doubt in the sense that there may have been some causation, and then even though they could be completely full of shit. I don't know. You know what I mean? None of us really know. But if they've been good in prison as far as not causing issues, and then, but there's no doubt. Like, to me, it would be a couple things for parole. Do I acknowledge that I committed a crime independent of what was done to me?
I don't think they'll say no. I don't think they'll say no to that.
I think that's something that's important because
they have to admit it. Yes, they have to admit
that, hey, listen,
we did this.
Maybe this happened, but that does not give me the right to.
What I did was wrong. It was heinous. Yes.
You could go to the police. You know.
Yes. Exactly.
You could go to the police, and could they go to the police when they were 8 years old? Probably not. Obviously, they didn't know.
They could go to a teacher. They go to a counselor.
Right, but they were 20 years old and 18. They were not kids anymore.
Yes. They weren't babies. No,
they could walk. Now, I believe that there's a psychological toll. Absolutely,
there's
no doubt about it. They're probably weighing the things that they have to lose if they did that, right? But there's no doubt that if you go and commit murder, that you're going to lose everything.
Yes, and they did.
So when you're weighing alternatives in the situation that maybe let's play the advocate on their side. This stuff happened. They're weighing the fact that they like their parents dead because they hate them. Okay. They're weighing the consequences of they may not get money if they go to the police, right? And they can't prove it, right? They'll get cut out of the will because there is a money motive here. There is
100%,
100% of money motive. So it's not just about they hate their parents. It's they
wanted the inheritance because
they wanted the inheritance.
The father was threatening to take them out of the will. You're 100% right.
Which of course he was never gonna. That's so ridiculous.
No.
It's like. But I understand how kids think. Kids think when parents make their threats, because parents make threats, because parents
kids flip out. We all do it.
They automatically think that this is 100%. And do I think he was a non-communicative parent? 100%. Maybe a completely. If he's a narcissist, he definitely was a non-communicative parent. He's probably a very, very poor communicator. So, and if he was abusing them, obviously there's all kinds of other things that he's trying to hide and keep down, right? So, but the leap to commit murder, there were other alternatives there. You know, you're going to lose it all if you do that, right? And that's usually what stops people from when they're in a fight, when they're in an argument, disagreement.
They don't want to lose their lives.
Right. You know, exactly. They don't want to lose their whole livelihood, which stops them. They were willing to risk their whole livelihood, and if they did it, and they went under the radar and tried to
they tried to justify it and they tried to hide it.
Yeah, and they tried to take all the money they could.
They did. They spent as much as they could. But they're kids. Like I'm sure I would have too if I got that much money. I would have bought Rolexes and Porsches. I have to.
You had committed murder?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. We unfortunately have to wrap this up. I got to jump on another show. I thought this was a fantastic first episode.
Yes.
The sentencing hearing is coming up. Quick prediction. Yes or no? Are they going to get resentenced and get paroled, or are they going to get resentenced and stay in jail?
I think they're going to get paroled.
I think they're going to get paroled too.
I think you will have either way people protesting.
100%. So for the first episode of Bloodlines Betrayals, a true crime podcast, we analyzed the Menendez case inside and out, the resentencing that is coming up. Should they be paroled? Should they stay in jail? We'll find out next week. I am Steve Cully, best podcast host in the universe.
And comment your opinions, by the way. When you watch this, we want to hear from you, right?
Yes, we want to know. We want to know what you think.
We want to know your opinion. It's not just about our opinion. We want to know your opinion.
We want to know if I'm a moron. Yes. And Coach Schumann, the fabulous Coach Schumann, excellent analysis and insight. Bloodline and betrayals. Remember, when life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Take 2 oranges. You throw them back at life.